Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, first of all, my name is Charlie Downes. I'm the Campaigns Director at Restore Britain. I'm also a writer for the Daily Mail, and I appear regularly on GB News, LBC, Talk TV, Lotus Eaters, and elsewhere. That is a really interesting question, and it's something that I think about every day of my life. Because it's obvious to me that left-wing politics, progressive politics, completely have, they don't serve the interests of anyone, let alone young people. Yet every mouthpiece of power in our society, from the government itself to the educational institutions to media, the entertainment industry, everywhere that has a voice for power, feeds young people the idea that they should be progressive, they should be left-wing progressive. Now, I think these terms left and right are increasingly important because the principle that I try to pursue in my work is just truth. And I know that's such a cliche thing to say, but in my view, there is a great deal of BS on both the left and the right in politics in Britain. So I think subscribing to these labels and putting yourself in these boxes is not actually hugely helpful a lot of the time. And increasingly, I am structuring my worldview not around left and right, not around ideology, really, and policy and this sort of thing, but actually around the eternal structures that constitute human civilization. It's my deeply held belief that just as there are a set of unchanging, eternal, objective principles that govern the physical world, so too there is a set of unchanging principles that govern the metaphysical world, so the realm of morality and truth and beauty and so on. And these manifest in the structures of human civilization. I got married 2 weeks ago, which was and I always knew at a kind of at an intrinsic level that marriage was very important in society. It's only since being married and truly understanding what marriage is that I've understood that it is the foundation of civilization, and it is out of marriage that all the rest of the structures kind of emerge. So out of marriage you have the household. This is parents, children, and property. You then have the tribe, which is a collection of households. You then have the nation, which is a collection of tribes. And you then have a kingdom, which is a nation united under one law in one land, under one leader. And governing all of that is the church. And that is what informs the morality of each of these structures and gives it its kind of guiding principle. So my politics is very much rooted in what serves each of these structures, what serves marriage, what serves the household, what serves the tribe, what serves the nation, and so on. And so I don't see these kinds of ideas communicated anywhere, really. I don't see many people on the right speaking in these terms. It's still, we're still very much caught up in immigration, woke identity politics, and so on, and all the problems that they bring, which is legitimate. But actually the battle that we're in, and it is a battle, it's a spiritual battle, it's far, far more profound and deeper than just these kind of humdrum day-to-day policies. So I realise I'm going on a bit, so I'll wrap up. That is basically my worldview, is what serves those covenantal structures. And if something doesn't serve that, well, I see no reason that we should permit it.
Thank you. We'll come back to those points and questions. Albie, what's your quick analysis of your vision?
First of all, it's so good to see such a full room for the future of conservatism. I'm not sure how many rooms are full of people wondering about what's happening to the Conservative Party in the future at the moment. So I'm glad to see you. Maybe the polls are wrong after all, or maybe they're right. So what's my worldview about what's next for the young? I have to say, there wasn't much that Charlie said that I disagreed with. I am one of the many young people who has actually recently started going back to church and refinding my faith to have a sense of belief, a sense of purpose, a sense of community, all of these things that I think that modern day society, living in our smartphones, working on our computers from home, we can feel increasingly atomised. And I think reviving that quiet cultural Christianity that Britain has always historically had, we've never been loud about it, like the Americans, I think that's a little bit too tacky and over the top, but that quiet cultural Christianity that's Protestantism that has underpinned British and indeed Western civilization throughout the ages. A lot of economic historians would argue one of the reasons the Industrial Revolution happened in northwestern Europe was because of Protestantism. So I think that's got to be a core part of the future of the right. I also think, when I think of our generation, and I'm slightly older than Charlie, we're a generation that's looking for purpose, I would say. I don't know that we're a bunch of reactionaries, but I think in my lifetime at least, I speak for myself, in my lifetime, it feels that there's been a loss of pride, a loss of stability, a loss of faith in progress. We were brought up and taught in school that Britain was this amazing country, this huge empire. We invented things like railways, we built an aeroplane, the Concorde, with the French, which was so advanced 50 years ago, it still looks more advanced than any passenger plane flying at the moment. And yet, in our lifetimes, I remember watching the last Concorde flying over China Green, just where I live. And it just feels that we're getting further and further away from that period of greatness. Now, I think we've got to have some perspective. I was at an association dinner with Nigel Bigger, Lord Bigger, a couple of days ago in Muswell Hill. He's a lot older than we are all on this panel, probably a lot older than most people in this room. And he said, yes, things are bad now, but let me give you all a sense of perspective. I remember growing up in the 1970s, he said, not me, when he would have to do his homework by candlelight because of the miners' strikes. But the reason he gave up sugar in tea was because the dockers' strikes meant there was no sugar to buy in the shops. So we've got to have a sense of perspective. Yes, things aren't as we would like them to be, but they are certainly not as bad as they have been in the past. He also mentioned that his father grew up through 2 world wars. Now, none of us, thankfully, have had that experience. But that doesn't mean, I think, the right, or the young in general, are happy with the status quo. I think young people, and all people, but young people especially, they want to know and live in a country where if they work hard and play by the rules, they can get on in life and they can have all of the advantages and prosperity that their parents and their parents and grandparents did. But actually, if you look at the polling for a lot of young people, they don't think their future is going to be as bright as their parents. The right needs to address that.
Okay, so you both sat your stalls and you said certain things that you agree with, that you perhaps don't agree with the hyper-secularism that we've had, and that we need to find a sense of foundation in the country's Christian heritage, and also provide a sense of kind of family values and marriage and things like that. But let's try and get into some of the things that you disagree with then, because this is a debate after all. So one of the things that I sense might be a difference is how we go about doing those things. Because one of the things that's been quite interesting since the death of the murder of Charlie Kirk is there seems to be a shift on the right that some people think are still holding that banner of debate, discussion, freedom of speech, let's win things in the marketplace of ideas, whereas other people, I think understandably, are saying, well, when the left were in power, they didn't care about free speech. They just imposed their will, and we all had to be subject to that. And maybe that we need to kind of take a leaf out of that book. So on that spectrum of how we go about, reviving this vision, where would you say that you approach that, Charlie?
To be honest with you, I am still making my mind up. Because I used to, a few years ago, be very much in favour of free speech, and I believe that debate was always and everywhere a good thing, a truth-seeking exercise. But now I'm not so sure about that. I think, first of all, if you are up against opponents who would rather literally see you murdered than debate your ideas, you can't debate with those people, and any attempt to do so is just foolish. But more to the point, I think people believe things for all sorts of reasons. Like, people believe things because it serves them. Like the reason that people believe things is not always because those things are true. And so I think that the idea that debate is the best way to arrive at the truth, I just don't think that that's true. I think that there are self-serving reasons for people to believe certain things and to take certain positions and to agree with one person on a panel and disagree with another. And many of those reasons are, I think, they're not rooted in truth, fundamentally.
Well, so take the issue of the Christianity thing. The facts of the matter right now is that it's not the majority in terms of professed belief. Like, even if we recognise that as part of the country's history, I think the polls show that only 40% of the country identify as Christians. So how do you practically realise a revival of something rooted in something that people are rejecting?
Well, I think it has to be embodied. I mean, I think you display what you believe by what you do, not by what you say. And that's the other thing with speech as a kind of truth-seeking mechanism is people can say whatever they want, but what they actually believe is what they do, right? And so I think the best way to win, certainly young people, which is what we're talking about, over to a more Christian, a more muscular position on what's right and what's wrong, a more a genuine belief in objective morality, which is the case. You have to give them an example to follow. You have to get married. You have to have children. You have to own a house. You have to do all these things which, historically, were just the norm, but which today are viewed as great achievements. If you can own a house under the age of 30 in this country, you're looked at like some kind of great entrepreneur or something. You're like some kind of hero if you can own a house. But I think only in doing these things and in showing that these values and these principles make your life better, and they make the lives of the people around you better, and they fill you with this sense of fulfillment, satisfaction and meaning that has been totally neglected by the mainstream. I think that's pretty effective, and that's far more effective than debate.
And what do you say, Albie?
Well, let's not beat around the bush. The reason Charlie and I are debating is because we had a very mean-spirited debate on Twitter about this very topic, about whether or not we should keep on debating each other and winning arguments, or destroy lefties by shutting down their organisations, banning their symbols, jailing their leaders, all of these things that, for me, as someone that believes in debate, the battle of ideas, if you will, I find totally objectionable. And I come back to Christianity, which is what we first picked up on. I think one of the most important Christian teachings is treat others how you'd like to be treated. Now, the right has not enjoyed when the left has cancelled right-wingers on university campuses. The right has not enjoyed being cancelled when we have taken common-sense positions on race relations, on religious relations, on the folly of biological sex not being real that some people on the left want to push. The right has not enjoyed that when the left has done it to us. So why do we think that by doing it to the left, only for them to do it to us again in the future, if we live in this eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth world which Christianity utterly rejects, why would we want to be pushing that sort of discourse? I agree with Charlie when he says that we should not just talk about what we believe in, that we should embody our principles and live by them. I agree with what Charlie says about getting married and having children. In the last talk, I don't know if any of you were there, the racial grievance talk, I said at the end, if you're worried about the great replacement theory, have children. If you are worried about community centres being taken over by religions not from the United Kingdom, go to church, volunteer more. We've got to live by our principles as well as just talk about them. So I agree with all of that. But I think the future of the right has got to be less complaining, more active, more doing. Because we can do things to change the way things are going. We've just got to make the time to actually do it.
I just wanted to come back on the point of that tweet that I did about what our approach to the left should be. I do stand by that. I just don't see why you should permit people in public life to be calling for, someone like Hassan Piker, for example. There's no reason to not jail him, because he's called for the murder of conservatives in the streets, quite open, and has enjoyed huge promotion, huge audience online, and I don't see any value in permitting him to spread his lies about not just politics, not just his opponents, but just every aspect of reality. I don't believe that error has any rights, and I just don't think that. As I said, my fundamental guiding principle is: does the thing in question, does it serve marriage? Does it serve the household, and so on? And if you have somebody in a public space spreading ideas that fundamentally, explicitly seek to undermine those structures, ideas that seek to undermine the household and marriage as structures, why should they be permitted to do that?
Because in a free society, Charlie, even if there are people that we find we don't agree with and that do not live the way that we wish them to live or live the way that we live, as long as they're not breaking a law, we've got to let them get on and do that. And I would say that when it comes to people who have quite clearly incited violence, if you're saying people are calling for conservatives to be killed, you can have a conversation about incitement of violence and whether or not it's a tool of censorship, but you know, there are legal limits to that. You can't just go and incite violence on people. We've seen what happens when that sort of thing goes on. So we already have a legal framework within which that works. I suppose my question is, do you want to go further than that? Do you think we need to go further than our current society?
Well, can I just come back up to you, Albie? Because what do you say to those is that we have had an onslaught for the last 5-10 years of cancellation, demonisation of anyone that doesn't hold a particular progressive orthodoxy. And people are perhaps exhausted and demoralised, and it's all well and good to ask for certain people to always hold that kind of moral high ground. Isn't the energy going towards this more absolutist direction because people are just frankly fed up?
Charlie made some very good points about what is right and what is wrong, and those things are not subjective, they're objective. Now, it is right that we have open, free debates with each other about all different types of topics without fear of being persecuted, without fear of being locked up, without fear of being beaten up for things that we say in a civil manner in a civilised society. That is right. What is wrong is seeking to do all of those awful things to people that we disagree with. We see those in other countries around the world, we've seen it in Europe, we've railed against it. We talk about the liberal democratic principles that we have developed in this country and being quite proud of them. I think we've got to take that moral high ground. Otherwise, this difference between right and wrong that Charlie talks about, that I'm sure many of us identify with, is not being embodied, is it?
Well, I would say to that, the regime that currently governs our country and the rest of the West, it does believe that it doesn't really believe in truth, but in its revealed preference, it does believe that its moral system is objectively correct, and they behave like that. They have the courage of their convictions, and if somebody doesn't agree or is not down with those beliefs, it's very hard for them to get a job in any major corporation. It's very hard for them to find a place in a mainstream political party. And it's because our opponents they believe that they're right. And I don't see why the right should be, should be so, so scared of asserting that, no, actually, we are correct, we are right, and we're going to act as if that's the case. And we're not going to give into this idea that truth is to be discovered by sitting across from somebody and having a debate with them, who just is approaching it in fundamentally bad faith.
I mean, I think there's a fundamental difference between people being confident in their beliefs and talking about it, and people who disagree with other people thinking that actually the way to solve that problem of the disagreement that two people have is to jail, ban, or somehow persecute the person that you disagree with. I mean, objectively, that is wrong, and I think we should be loud and proud about saying that without saying things like what you said.
Well, I want to give you one example of something I've said online, which is the Progress Pride flag, which you'll all be familiar with. It's the flag of the flag of the regime, effectively. It's this rainbow flag with the black and brown and the trans lines on it, and it's the flag of chaos, right? It's the flag of everything.
And it's ugly.
Yeah, it's disgusting. It's
ugly.
But those are the kinds of symbols that I would be saying, why not ban that? It symbolises everything. It's anti-truth, anti-morality, anti-beauty.
But what about democracy? Obviously, that argument hasn't necessarily been unequivocally won yet. We still have to live in a society where there is clearly, it's definitely not the majority, but a substantial minority that do advocate for your views. So is there a danger in it kind of spiralling out of control if we're just constantly banning each other?
Well, once again, the people who buy into the ideas represented by the Progress Pride flag, I just don't think you're going to be able to win them over by a kind of a free exchange of ideas, because I think the reason that they believe in those ideas is not because they are pursuers of truth. They believe those ideas because those ideas serve them, serve their lifestyle, serve the way they live.
So just actually sticking to this point about whether we should embrace things of the left or reject it, one of the things I think has been an interesting dividing line is this question of identity politics. So I think for a long time the kind of right had critiqued identity politics as putting people against each other in different groups based on immutable characteristics. But it does seem that we are seeing perhaps a development within identity politics where some on the right are saying that we need to think much more about kind of English identity and in a kind of oppositional manner. People might reject that characterization happy to disagree with me. But I guess going back to what Albie was saying about, is there a danger if we just reproduce these same tactics that has led to so much of that anxiety and division? It's a kind of, it will fail. So what do you think about this idea that the right are increasingly embracing identity politics around ethnicity?
Well, first of all, on the point of embracing the tactics of the left, I think, again, if you view the tactics in and of themselves as being wrong or immoral, I understand it to a certain extent, but I think that hinges on the idea that their ideas and our ideas are of equal value, which I don't agree with. I think that if you are doing things in the name of truth and in the name of morality and in the name of God, if you will, then I think that it's far more acceptable to do it in the name of degeneracy and opposition to the idea of truth and all these sorts of things. So there's a qualitative distinction between the ideas that motivate the tactics, right? And I think that's important to know. Now, on the topic of identity politics, my answer to this is, I think there's a lot of very simplistic thinking on the right when it comes to the politics of identity. It's a very easy answer to say, well, where you say, I'm a black, gay, disabled, queer woman, trans woman, or whatever. I say I'm a white, straight Englishman. Like, that was always going to happen, right? When the left started going down this route, that was always going to be the reaction to that. And I don't think that the simplistic thinking on the right on this topic is good. And actually, I think that our identity, because identity is a inescapable aspect of human experience, and people need a sense of identity in order to feel complete, fundamentally. And it's no surprise that where so many different aspects of our identities have been stripped away by the culture, by the education system, and so on, that people look elsewhere for them. I don't think it's any surprise that the kind of woke identity politics emerged. It was out of the deconstruction of identities based in marriage, household, tribe, nation, kingdom, and church that identities based in sex, sexuality, and race emerged. And so what I would say is, in response to the kind of progressive idea of identity politics, which is rooted in minority interests, sexuality, race, and so forth, I would say a far more positive, generative form of identity politics is to be found in saying, I'm a husband, I am a father, hopefully soon to be, a father, I'm an Englishman, I'm a Christian. That is my identity, if you had to boil it down to different points. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think it's an essential thing.
It's a very interesting thing Charlie just said about how he views our identity should be in a primary fashion. It's actually, the way you just described it, husband or son of Michael or daughter of Pamela or whatever, primarily referring to one's identity and thinking of yourself within that sort of familial unit is actually a very foreign way of thinking. It's not particularly Western. It's very common in the global South, for example. So I find it interesting for a number of reasons that is why that is how Charlie thinks we should be thinking about ourselves. Look, I don't think it's wrong, I don't think it's right, I don't particularly have strong opinions on that. I think the primary identity that can bind us in this country is the fact that we all live in the same country, the fact that we're all British if we're in the United Kingdom, the fact that if we're born in England, we're English, or born in Scotland, we're Scottish, born in Wales, Welsh, Northern Ireland, it's a bit more complicated. we won't go into that, the Irish, British, whatever, or maybe you're from Ulster. But it's this sense of nation and patriotism that I think 21st century liberalism has sought to erode from different countries. Nationalism is seen as a bad thing. Now, there can be some bad elements of nationalism. If you may be a bit more ethno-nationalist, you think those sorts of things, I might say that was a little bit more negative. Other people might have different opinions. If you say that you're more civically nationalist, that people come to this country, live by our norms, live by our customs, obey the law, work, contribute, they can be just as British as somebody whose family has been here for decades. I think that's nationalism that we can all get behind. So I think that we've got to get back to those roots, as well as focusing on family.
Because there's too much agreeing here.
Well, I can't disagree with that.
Yeah, because fundamentally the reason we're having this debate is because there has been a rise of ethno-nationalism on the right. There have been debates by some, primarily on the internet, and it's a small minority, but significant nonetheless, that are talking about remigration, not just of foreign criminals or illegal migrants, but of people that have been here for more than one generation. And I think that this is where there is this kind of tension taking place on the right. And even this group at Lowe's group obviously is a splinter out of reform, arguably.
Yeah.
And they were pushed out of reform because I don't know, Nigel thought that they were too right-wing or something like that. Yes, we won't get into that, but I think we should. This is a free speech space, this is a safe space for disagreement, and I think we've got to get to the heart of what we're disagreeing on.
I'd like to come in on what Albie said, because I think this is crucial. On the question of nation, which is, in my view, one structure among many that is under attack. It's very visibly under attack, because it's the one that is, in a lot of ways, most vehemently hated by the regime that governs our country and other countries. But the idea that national identity can be found in values, I think, is just nonsense. And I think we've been trying to do that for the last 30 years. You had Blair talking about uniting around basic British values in the late 90s, and it's failed. The project has failed. It doesn't work. It's not strong enough glue to hold the nation together. And
what do you think the glue should be?
Well, I think it's a number of different things. Again, this is where the simplistic thinking on a lot of the right is a problem, because I think those people who are ethno-nationalists, if you want to use that, you've used that language, so I'll use that language, who think that it is basically just blood, if you want, that constitutes a nation. That's a materialistic view, and I'm not a materialist. I think materialism is poison, and it's at the root of a lot of the problems that we have today. However, that's not to say that one's ancestry and lineage is irrelevant to one's identity, because obviously it isn't. And in every time and place, apart from 21st century Europe, that's been acknowledged and understood, right? But it's not just that. It's not just one thing. However, as I said, I'll come back to the kind of the structures that I use to understand the world. The nation as a structure emerges out of a collection of tribes, and that happened in England in a very, we all learn about that in history at school. A series of tribes migrated over onto the British Isles over the last 2,000 or so years, and eventually formed a nation under, the process was started by King Alfred, and then his grandson Ethelstan united the Kingdom of England. And so that is it's a combination of its land, it's to an extent it is lineage, it is ancestry. We can't get around that, and that's the really uncomfortable. That's the thing that makes people uncomfortable. But it is simply the case that ancestry has to have some. It is a component of national identity, but it is also religion. I would say. We use this language of values in the modern day, but what we're really talking about is religion, theological, cosmological views about what's right and wrong. And really, if you have a group of people living in the same land who have fundamentally different ancestries, fundamentally different religions, that's not a nation, no matter how much they sing Rule Britannia and subscribe to democracy.
So, when it comes to ancestry, I mean, I've never really been particularly bothered when people online say things like, go back to Africa. Because I'm mixed race, I often say, what do you want to split in half, and half of me can stay here, half of me can go back to Africa. So these conversations around ancestry, they don't really bother me because I feel like because I'm not English. I am by both blood and also by the way that I live. I don't think on the black side of my family, they think my sisters and I are any more English than them. And I don't think on the white side of my family, they think my sisters and I are any less English than they are, because we all live by the same norms. We subscribe to this culture. It's not just because we were born here, it's how we live. I suppose it is buying into these values, but not just buying into them, not just talking about them, living by them, as Charlie was saying before. And we're talking about the future of the young right here. So if we look at the under 25 cohort, it is the most ethnically diverse cohort in the country by quite some margin. About 25% of all people under the age of 25 are of non-white heritage. A lot of them are mixed race, but a significant amount of them are of non-white heritage. Now, the future of conservatism cannot talk about English or British nationality in a way that excludes people who are not white. Otherwise, it will not be attractive to the young. And I'm not just talking about the young people who are from ethnic minority backgrounds. if 25% of all young people in the country are from ethnic minority backgrounds, that means the other 75% are probably going to be friends with them. So they're not going to, those people who might not be from ethnic minority backgrounds, they might be white, they might have a black girlfriend, or an Asian friend, or a mixed race cousin. So this politics of race and ethnicity and being exclusive about what we say is English and what we say isn't English or British, I don't think it's going to work with the younger generation, which is why we've got to create inclusive nationalism. If we want to talk about nationalism, I think we should, it's got to be an inclusive one.
I think that's really interesting, what you said there, Albie, because I think there's a distinction in my mind that I think about a lot, and it's what I call the popular true distinction. And I think it comes with what I was saying earlier about people believing things for all sorts of things, for all sorts of reasons rather. I think that a large reason that some people believe things is because they're popular, as opposed to they're true. And what you're describing is a politics based on popularity, what the majority of people can agree with, right? Whereas what I'm seeking to find is truth. And I don't think, as I said before, I think if you seek to undermine any of the covenantal structures of human civilization, marriage, household, tribe, nation, kingdom, and church, if you try to undermine and behave as if any one of those don't matter, I think that you see destruction and chaos, because our leaders, for the better part of probably 80 years, have behaved as if the nation and the tribe are structures that not just don't matter, but are actively evil and should be destroyed. And I think what happens when you try to take a sledgehammer to these structures is, if you want, the sledgehammer bounces off, the structure is undamaged, and it swings around and hits you in the head.
Should we talk about what's true then, very quickly, just if you want to talk about true? So 77% of white English people think that people who aren't white can be English. Only 2% of people in this country would not be happy to have a non-white person as their neighbour. 89% of people in this country would be happy if their child married someone of a different race. You know, that is what is true, and the future of the right has got to take into account that actually Britain is not a particularly bigoted country. So when we're talking about right-wing politics, if we look at the right-wing politics in England, I mean, look at Zia Yusuf, look at Suella Braverman, look at Rishi Sunak. You know, even the right wing in this country is a lot more diverse than other parts of the world. And the truth is, I find myself debating with people on the hard right and debating with people on the hard left, and saying the same thing. These ideas will never be popular in Britain because we're not a particularly racist country. And you can make that argument to people on the far left or people who are further to the right than I am, and you sort of feel like this weird, crazy person, but ultimately, that's where most people are, and that's where the right needs to be.
But you see, you're still talking about what's popular, though.
No, you just true.
No, you just said that these are not popular views. Whereas what I'm seeking to talk about.
Well, no,
but the extent to which something is popular in polling doesn't mean that it's true.
Well, here's an example.
Right.
Bob Marley, because actually he's half English, his father's English.
Scottish.
British. Or British, ethnically British. And obviously, someone like Rishi Sunak, he hasn't got English ancestry. But would you say that Bob Marley is more British than Rishi Sunak?
This is where we get into the weeds. I mean, look, we have to be.
It's quite a clear question.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it brings me no joy to live in a time and to feel called to do a job where I have to talk about these really dicey topics, right? But yes, I would say that by virtue of having an ethnically British ancestor, if you want, yes, that does make him more British than
It doesn't
Rishi Sunak.
matter if someone's born or lived here or contributed to this society, they could never really be British.
Well, there is one mechanism, in my opinion, by which they can, and it's marriage.
Right.
So just believing in democracy and the rule of law and tolerance and all the rest of it, all of the British values ensconced in law by Michael Gove in 2015, that doesn't make you British. However, marrying into the tribe, yeah, that's a perfectly reasonable definition for becoming a member.
No, I think that's very interesting. I'm going to take it out to the floor. I mean, I don't, I think both of these ideas here, worthy of debate. I'm a British citizen. My father, my child, my partner, he's Scottish ethnically. But I don't necessarily think, I can see what you mean, that there's something about, I don't know, buying into the native people, so to speak, that is a kind of a deeper endorsement, but I find it hard to think that something's fundamentally changed about my Britishness because I'm in a relationship with him. But I think it's important to try and seek to find something more substantive than just a passport or just being here. I think clearly people want something more thick about what it means to be British. So we've got 10 minutes, so we'll take it out to the floor. Okay, we'll take a few questions at a time. Lisa.
Where I'm from Bradford, obviously that's got a lot of issues and it's quite ethnically and religiously divided in some areas. But just for example, I've got a friend, he's a Muslim counsellor, independent counsellor. He'd be considered right wing with some of his social views, but I still think he's quite different to some of the other maybe hard online right in the overall world. Do you think there is a bit of a difference on the right, even if some of the values are the same on paper?
Okay.
So on the point about free speech and free expression, isn't one of the points that by having free discussion, it gives you the opportunity to potentially learn from your own mistakes? So the overall question towards you, Charlie, has everyone been in a situation where you've watched a debate or even been in a debate and actually had your own minds changed as a result of the discussion?
Okay, we'll just take two more. Gentleman right at the back.
Oh. Firstly, my God, what smart guys you are. I'm blown away by just how smart. This is part of the question. It does kind of make me curious to think, my God, you seem so smart, but how often do you collaborate? Come together and work together?
Only when we argue on Twitter.
Do you believe that maybe looking forwards, right, left, there's a bit of everyone's manifesto that everybody could pick a little bit out of, maybe time to collaborate and maybe that would kind of, I don't know, invigorate kind of a bit more, I don't know, punch into the kind of political game for young people now?
Yes.
Okay, all of us in various ways are involved in politics, so you have? No, you, yeah.
Me? Oh, yes. Yeah, so I was going to give a massive speech, but I'll try and turn it into a question.
30 seconds.
Basically, like, don't you think that you sort of dismiss, like, this idea of, like, materialist politics, about the economy and stuff, but don't you think this is actually, what actually wins over young people? Fundamentally, Corbyn was popular because he was offering to give us free university, free public transport for young people. That's great. Why doesn't the right, you're complaining about, well, young people aren't getting married. Young people get married much more often if we can afford fucking houses. Like, it's, yeah.
I think that's a very good point. You at the back?
Neither of you have mentioned the notion of assimilation, but is that not perhaps an approach on which you could both agree? In other words, I mean, it's a little bit broader than just marriage, but something that nevertheless recognises the importance of a common identity.
I agree with that. We'll just try and take as many to round up.
Just to follow that point. What do you do when you have very, very large communities running into millions that have no intention whatsoever of assimilating? Culture and race, that's a truth point that I would like to give.
I think that's fair. We'll just take three more and then just round up for you two.
Yeah, question for Charlie, really. I'm just wondering if you wanted to ban somebody who had a rainbow flag, why can they vote so you can try and fine them and they refuse to pay the fine? But if in the prison, it's do somebody in prison for flying on like a small flag. That's not even practicality, because that would be really sensible.
Okay.
Hi, so I identify as Black British. My family have been here since before the Windrush. I'd say that we assimilated by virtue of being here for so long. So is your argument that unless we marry outside of, our race or our culture, despite being so assimilated, a lot of Caribbeans are very much assimilated into the UK because of colonialism. Unless we do that, we aren't part of the English.
An interesting point, actually. More Black Caribbean men marry white English women than they do Caribbean women, and it's not clear to me that they are necessarily not still subject to the same delegitimization of like their Britishness with the Windrush scandal. So they actually have very much married into the native system. So it's definitely we'll take 2 more questions.
Yeah, I'd like to make a point with regards to speed change, particularly with regards to demographics. My opinion is that with the values of promoting the culture of a nation as a way to make inclusive nationality, and then lineage and ancestry is something that we just sort of decide. I think that's something that takes time to create a compact which is meaningful with regards to social cohesion. And one of the reasons for the divisions at this time is that the demographic change is happening so rapidly.
I think you both agree that migration has been at ridiculous levels. Yeah, I think everyone probably would agree with that. Okay, we need to round up. Take various points.
Okay, where to begin? There's a lot.
So
Trying to remember what the questions
longer.
are we just wrapping up, or are we going to address some of the points? Okay. Look, I think that Albie, I think you're a very nice guy, and I like you a lot as well. I think you're both like very good, decent people.
Now comes the answer.
To your question at the back, I do believe that there are irreconcilable differences between mine and Albie's worldviews, and I don't know that sort of seeking to both of us compromise is necessarily a good thing, because I don't. Because
are you really saying that?
Yeah.
You don't want to compromise.
No, I mean if you believe in.
Well, some of it is the purpose of the audience to be able to hear the discussion.
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course. Yeah, sure. But I think that really. Look, Albie, I think your views are essentially those of the British state for the last 20 or so years, and I think those views, those principles, having been tried and having been shown to have failed utterly, should give you pause for thought as to why you actually believe these things.
Well, I actually would think that we've agreed more than I thought we would have done from the beginning. So
I'm a very agreeable guy.
If my views are the views of the British state for the last 30 years, then maybe yours are as well. I think what I would say is that on the point that this gentleman in the black shirt made about us having housing that we can afford, that then being the foundation of people wanting to get married, people wanting to have children, people wanting to buy into that culturally Christian-ness that you and I, maybe all of us all
it's not just cultural Christianity.
Well, whatever. I mean, I'm both a practicing and a cultural Christian. But for a lot of people, talking about a Christian revival is a turn-off. We've talked about this about. So if we talk about cultural Christianity, it can be more inclusive if we want to bring more people back to the church. So that would be that point. But I think a lot of it does hinge on economics, but it's not just economics. There are also cultural factors that we need to talk about that I think lie within this sense of civic nationalism that I've been talking about.
Well, thank you we only have 45 minutes, so maybe we'll do another one of these.
Now you packed so much to that 45 minutes.
So thank you so much for coming. And there's also someone has left their bag, Mr. George Wildsmith.